If if you are unaware, we're in a series called At the Movies, and that was by all. I will be honest, that was whiplash. Going from worship, what we just experienced, like singing in the moment, like crying, emotional, all of that, to Independence Day. Any guesses to how old that movie is? You can 96. Nailed it. You can. I was gonna say you can kind of guess by the graphics and stuff on there. Um, no, that's Independence Day. We are in, like I said, the series that I love. I love movies. I don't know if you do. I don't know where your feelings are on movies, but I thoroughly enjoy them. They are rapidly growing into something that has allowed my imagination to take a break and a rest. Because earlier, when I was younger, movies were pretty good, but you could see that it was a movie. As technology has increased, and even since then, it's like, is that real life? I don't know. My imagination doesn't do as much work. When I'm reading a book, my imagination, obviously, we have to fill in all the blanks. Movies today, a little bit different. So during the series, we're using this movie, specifically Independence Day, as the backdrop to the conversation, kind of the picture in place in order to walk through. Last week, I kind of looked at a broad scale, like the counterattack, right? We're under attack. We have aliens around us. We didn't go there, but that's a different conversation for a different time. But we went into the counterattack, like when we're under attack, what do we do when we're under attack in this world? And typically, what we've seen and what we've noticed in recent years is that our marriages, like the most important relationships in our life, our marriage, our close relationships, are under attack. They're being undermined by what the world around us tells us is okay and acceptable. And then you get into it's like, wow, I wish I hadn't, because something that you did before affected what the relationship you're in today. Other relationships that are under attack is our relationship with God. Kind of this whole wrestling match about who is God, where is God, how does God work, and I don't know where you're at in the faith journey part, but if you're trying to wrestle with that, there's an understanding also that there is an enemy that doesn't want you to engage in that conversation. That there's opposition to this. Is this flickering? It is. Driving you nuts, driving me nuts too. Let's try to fix that. So there is opposition to what we're trying to do here and talking about. Did that fix it? Bingo. You got to celebrate the wins, folks. Anyway, so our primary relationships are, God and our marriage and our family. Those relationships are under attack. Sometimes way overt and sometimes subtle. And what I said last week is the way we fight back is through intentional surrender, which doesn't sound like it makes sense. We're like, no, we gotta gear up and fight. But when we understand who God is, we are in the way of the battle when we try to fight all of those battles on our own. And it is when we step back and allow God's space into that conversation, into that arena, whatever arena that is in our life, that we can actually see how faithful God is, when we can actually see that God is moving and at work in us and through us. Even the most self-reliant person surrenders to something. And you might be thinking and arguing with me in your head, and that's fine. I do that all the time too, argue with myself. But you might be thinking, no, I've got it. I've got everything under control. Like my life is categorized in each category. My name's on it, and I'm in total control. Here's the thing. You're kneeling to something, and it might be your pride, and it might be fear, and it might be control. You're kneeling to something whether you recognize it or not. You might be kneeling to someone, but what we hope for is that we all learn that who it is that we kneel to is so important in our life, and we, obviously at church, we're going to talk about kneeling and surrendering to God. This week, we're going to look at more of rather than the broad idea of the movie, we're going to look at a very specific part in the movie, in Independence Day. So just to catch everyone up, just in case the trailer didn't do it for you. The aliens have arrived on Earth. They've camped out over the top of the most intentional strategic spots on the globe. They are ready to fire upon us, and eventually they do without any communication with us at all. And we are in this battle for survival. And the there's a scientist, there's a president, and there's a fighter pilot. Those are kind of the main characters. This scientist comes up with this understanding like, oh, they're using our satellites to communicate with each other. And if we upload a virus, right, this 30 years ago, if we upload a virus into their computers, then it'll ruin all of them at once. And then their shields will go down. We'll be able to fight on them or fire on them. So this is in the movie. This is the first hint of hope. Before then, it was like 3/4 of the movie, no hope whatsoever. We're just going to get decimated, and there's going to be a movie about the end of the earth. And instead, there's this fight back moment. The crazy part is that the scientist and the fighter pilot get into an enemy, like an alien spaceship that's been in Area 51 for decades, and fly that spaceship up to the mothership to upload the virus. So super realistic and very, like, it's a great storyline in there. But here's what's really important. Regardless of what happens in this moment, there needed to be pilots to fire upon the ship. So even if the miracle happens, right, the uploaded virus happens, you still have to have people firing from other planes onto these destroyers, or else it doesn't matter. The shield's down for a little bit and nothing happens. So what's important in the movie is everyone has a role to play. They grab any pilots like that are even remotely available. If you know how to fly a plane at all, they've asked you to show up and take a part, play a role for our survival as a whole. There's no like second chances here. There's no wait and see how this goes. This is it. This is our one battle or we're going to become extinct. In our real world today, like I said last week, there is an enemy that wants nothing more than to undermine and destroy the relationships that we have in this life, to kill, steal, and destroy your purpose, your identity, what's most important. So last week I did bring up some battles that we face. I talked about sex and money, which, you know, you're not supposed to really talk about those at church. And I talked about both of them in the same week, so it was a doozy. I'm surprised people came back, so congratulations. This week we're going to talk about rock and roll. We don't all have the same battles to fight. That's the reality. Every single one of us in this room is fighting a different battle. We have different struggles. We are up against it differently. Even in the same marriage, you might have two people that are in the same relationship and still have two different battles that they're fighting. But regardless of what those battles are, your battles will not be won without your participation in them. You cannot sit back and do nothing. You have to do something in order for there to be a change in direction. And what we know is that life comes at you fast. If you've lived on this planet long enough, you realize everything's going normal, and then all of a sudden there's just whiplash, from a beautiful worship set to a trailer about Independence Day. Like this, life comes at you fast. It changes in a minute. I don't know if you guys know this, Ernest Hemingway, he wrote a bunch of books. He was a guy in the past. He created this character in one of his books that goes broke, like loses all of his finances. And when that character is asked how it happened, I love the response. I love this quote. It's in The Sun Also Rises. He says 2 ways, gradually and then suddenly. And this is true of our life as well. I think this is great insight. Because most of our battles, this is true. This is happening. That there's this gradual, monotonous tension that, slowly creeps up. And then all of a sudden the invasion happens. All of a sudden in the blink of an eye, everything changes. Everything switches. And the double interesting part about this, Ernest Hemingway, his oldest son, had property actually nearby here, out of Anatone a little ways. Banassa Breaks Ranch is what it was called. And he loved to go fishing and loved the outdoors. And so it was within 4 of his favorite rivers within 30 miles. So he would do this or 30 minutes, excuse me. So he would do this. And for a long time, they owned the ranch. In 2004, the ranch was sold to a different outfit, different guy. And there was a stocked pond on the property, but the new owner decided to build up the pond a little bit more and make it more of like a reservoir. And over time, the reservoir walls actually weakened. So It was legal for the pond to be there because it's a smaller body of water. Over time, though, when the reservoir was built, they didn't get the proper permits, so it wasn't built properly, and it began to break down. No one knew about it until in 2017, this gradual became the sudden. And the entirety of the body of water that flowed, instead of a pond, it was a reservoir that flowed down the creek and hit into several different rivers, and it made a big, huge mess. Devastation for different animals and all kinds of stuff. There is 9.4 million gallons that rushed into something. Gradual and then sudden. That's how life works often. And it can describe so much of our lived experience, right? Some things nonchalantly fall into place and then switch to full force in a moment. These don't necessarily have to be good or bad either. They could be either. This is just a truth of how life works from time to time. For example, there's this book in the Old Testament. This is written, this takes place about 100 years after Israel was exiled into Babylon. So just kind of put that into perspective if you're familiar with the Old Testament. So some of the Jews, but not all of the Jews at this time, had returned to Israel, but a lot of Jews were not. And this person, Esther, and her uncle Mordecai lived in the capital of the Persian capital, in Susa is what it's called. So interestingly enough, this book that we're going to look at, it's in Esther is what it's called, it never once mentions God. Is that fascinating? In the Bible, there's an entire book that doesn't mention God once. Which I think it's just fascinating to me. Maybe it's because I'm a pastor, but it's written anonymously, and it's almost like it was written without the mention of God's name to draw you in and invite you to be like, I'm not even going to say his name, but you can see him, right? Like you can see him at work. There's an invitation to actually look beyond the lines into the in between the lines. Be like, that's a coincidence, I guess, maybe. There's an ironic reversal. Like, how does that even happen? It's almost as if some power is exerting itself. Right? That's what we see in our life too. Sometimes we're like, where is God in this moment? And we step back and we look back, years later on that season, we're like, well, it's pretty obvious, hindsight, that God was at work even when we didn't see it in the moment. So here's our main characters, the main historical figures in this book. Esther, Mordecai, they're both Israelites, they're both Jewish. King Xerxes is the one in charge, one in power, and Haman is he's a guy that's kind of risen up in leadership underneath the king. So King Xerxes, he has this big, huge banquet that lasts for a long time to just celebrate his great wealth and how big his kingdom is. He has a queen, her name is Vashti, and she is unwilling to do what he's asked her to do, in his own words, and what's written is to display her beauty to the nobles, which is kind of a weird thing like, hey, honey, come over here. Let everyone look at how beautiful you are. Like today, that wouldn't fly either. So she decides, no, I'm not doing that. And no, I'm not going to just let you show me off. That's weird. Don't do that. So normally, that would be the end of her life. Like if you did that to the king's like, well, then I've had enough of you. Done. But in this moment, I think really what has happened is she has some type of political stance or pull. She doesn't, if he kills her, that's going to upset some other people within his kingdom. So he decides, not going to do that. We're just going to banish you. We're just going to exit you from the rest of the story. You're no longer a player in this game. And this is when Esther shows up. Esther, the king decides he's going to have like this beauty pageant to decide who's the next queen. So all these ladies show up and arrive, and Esther shows up as well, and she wins the beauty pageant. Or we're going to look back at this and be like, is that a coincidence or is that on purpose? The king in this moment, he is so obsessed with Esther. He thinks she's the most beautiful that he's ever seen. He makes her the queen. And in this moment, all of a sudden, Esther has a relationship with the king. She never did before. She was just a person. Common person. In Mordecai, he hears about this plot to kill the king. And because Esther now is in the position she is, her uncle tells her what he'd heard, and the king is saved because they've discovered and uncovered this plot to kill the king. So that's important. Again, coincidence that Esther had the position, that Mordecai just randomly heard it, and that the relationship and the timing of all of that saved the king? We're going to find out. Haman, again, he is in this high position of leadership, and he decides that he wants everybody, as you do, to kneel before him. He's like, yeah, well, I've got some power now, so when I meet you, when you're in my presence, I would really like if you would just kneel before me. I mean, some guys, right? So that's Haman. He's not super in touch with everybody else. Mordecai in this moment refuses. He's like, no, not doing that. If you know anything about the Jewish people, no, we don't kneel before anyone or anything else other than our God. So we're not going to do that. Of course, Haman doesn't love that. He gets upset, gets angry. And because of that, he convinces the king to sign this decree with a bunch of stuff in it. But in the fine print, part of it is that the Israelites living in the kingdom will be destroyed. Like he wrote it, he's like, yeah, we're going to get them here. So he writes it, the king signs it, and they roll the dice. Literally, they roll dice to decide when this day is going to happen, when the time is going to come. It's in 11 months. So that kind of gives you the time frame of the rest of the part. Esther, Mordecai, Jewish, they have a high stake in this game, correct? They decide, of course, they need to come up with a plan to reverse the decree somehow, some way. But like I mentioned before, in order to address the king and present your idea, if he didn't first ask for it, that could be the end of your life. It's against the law. You can't do that. She's risking everything. She doesn't have the political power that Queen Vashti has, like to fall back on. So with her, it would likely end in her death. This is a far cry from me trying to wrestle with like my appearance and purchases I make, and do we need to go on more date nights as a husband and wife? Like, these are things that we often wrestle with, like, what do I need to do about these things? This is literally wiping out all of the Israelites in the country at this time. So big deal. A little bit more pressure than I normally deal with on a day-to-day basis, and I'm guessing probably you too. There's a call to arms in the movie, though. We're going to jump back and forth between this story and the movie. So back to the movie, Independence Day. There's this moment, right? Call to arms. All pilots, anyone that's ever flown a plane, we need you now. And in steps my guy, Russell. You guys remember Russell? If you've seen the movie, he's hard to forget. He had not won any beauty pageants. This is Russell. He's in life. He's had a rough go. So he was in the military for a while, and that's where he started to become a pilot. But then he got out of the military. He had an alien abduction event, according to him, and he eventually became a crop duster. And when you're introduced to him, he's crop dusting the wrong field. So things are going pretty good. Like, he's got life locked down. He's failing in a number of ways. In the movie, there's like this climax when everything is, it's crescendo to the biggest moment. The virus is uploaded, the shields are down, the pilots are engaging, and they're trying to fire these missiles. And of course, there's like a counterattack from the attackers. So they're trying to defend the destroyers. And in this moment, they run out of missiles. Nobody has a missile left on their jet any longer. And the president calls out, does anyone have a missile left? And Russell, his voice comes crackling across the sound waves. He says, armed and ready, sir. I'm packing. I love that moment. It's, okay, I did my best. He didn't wake up that morning with a plan to save the world. He didn't wake up that day even thinking that he'd be in a fighter jet. He wasn't searching for the spotlight. He wasn't looking to be the hero. But he was who was needed in that moment. Regardless of whether he thought he was ready or not, he was there. And that's exactly who needed to be used. And he steps up into this storm, and the rest of the pilots, they're like, all right, we got to protect him. And they kind of pave the way for him. They're protecting him as he gets closer. And there's this moment where, like, as he's approaching the heart of the destroyer, he gets the lock on his target. He's like, all right, Eagle 20, fox 2. You remember what happens? He tries to fire, nothing happens. He repeats Eagle 20, fox 2, just hoping that just by repeating the process it'll work out this time. Doesn't. It malfunctions. The missile is armed, but it's jammed and won't leave the ship, the jet. It's unable to be fired in that moment. The world is hanging by a thread, and he doesn't know what to do. Back to the Esther's scenario. Mordecai looks at Esther. He's like, this is the plan. We're going to be wiped out if nothing happens. That's what the decree says. We must do something about this. And he says to his niece, deliverance will come from somewhere. You're not excluded from this. Just because you're with the king now doesn't mean that you're not part of the Israelites. You're not part of the Jewish people anymore. You're going to be included in this process, however this plays out. And Mordecai's like, I've got faith something's going to happen. I just don't know what it is. But he turns to his niece and he says this, and who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. All of these random things have happened. All of these coincidences have occurred in order for you to have the position to do something in this moment. And we don't know what's hanging. We know what's hanging in the balance, but we don't know how it's going to work out. We all stand here at some point in our life, maybe multiple times. Maybe not with an entire people group, or maybe not with the world, on the brink. But we all stand in that moment of having a unique opportunity that we did not plan on, we did not expect to, but it's destruction or a chance. It's risky, and it will cost you something. And the question is, are you going to lean in that moment, or are you going to just try and see how it plays out? Is it worth it, is what you wrestle with. Is it worth it for the change that you hope occurs? Is it worth it for the freedom that you've been praying for, that you've been begging for, that the people that love you in your life have been praying for? Is it worth the investment that's going to cost you something? That's where Esther is, and this is her response in chapter 4, verse 16. Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. It might not mention God, but the omission doesn't remove the obvious. That they intentionally, before making this big choice and take one step in that direction, they're going to kneel before their God. They're going to submit to God. They're going to invite God into this. Before a step is taken, that can't be unstepped and undone. And this is the pattern that we should also engage with, that we would invite God into the battle with us, into the moment with us, and ask him for his protection. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Have you been there lately where you don't know what's going to happen? You've made the choice. You've taken the step, come up with the plan, and you're like, you know what? This is it. I've decided it's worth it, but I might lose everything in this moment. I might lose what I think is really important in this moment. The convictions have led you to a decision. Back to the movie, Independence Day, right? Russell, in that moment, has the only available missile. He's at the crossroads. He recognizes this. He has one missile left for survival. And he, in that moment, wrestles with what is most important. And he says, you know what? I've decided. Do me a favor. Tell my children I love them very much. And if you are a crier, that's the moment that it happens in the movie. But he recognizes that the cost is worth the possible outcome, even though it's large, right? Even in this moment. He says a lot more, but we can't say those words into the microphone here at church. The decision is made. He continues flying the jet with the armed missile attached to it, and he flies it straight into the heart of the destroyer, right? And it impacts and explodes on impact and brings down the entire destroyer of the whole ship. The day is won, essentially, because of that turning point, because of that moment. Esther has a turning point also. And it is an ironic reversal. In this moment, up until this point, everything has been going negatively. Like the entire people group, it's getting more dangerous and more dangerous and more dangerous to this point. They come up with a plan, Esther and Mordecai. She throws a banquet first with a few people. And then in that banquet, she's like, I've got a second banquet tomorrow for the king and for Haman. Just you two. It's exclusive. If you like tonight, you'll really like tomorrow night. So she invites them both to this exclusive banquet. Haman, who's drunk from the first one, he goes out into the street. Somehow he bumps into Mordecai, which angers him all the more. And he's like, you know what? I really don't like that guy. So he has people construct a giant stake, put it in the ground with the plan that in the morning, Mordecai is getting impaled on the stake. Like, that's how much he doesn't like him. So, quite a bit. Mordecai, remember, in this moment, Mordecai has been the guy for a little while. Like, he saved the king. So, the king is having a different experience. Haman's having the one where he's super upset. The king is getting tucked into bed. I know it's kind of weird, but he's getting tucked into bed. They're telling him like a bedtime story. And in the story, it reminds him of the plot that was uncovered. How Mordecai played a role in the king's life. Coincidence? I don't know, you call it. So the king wakes up, he's super thrilled and happy with Mordecai. Haman wakes up, he's like, today's the day. I'm gonna get him, my nemesis. Haman marches in to go talk to the king. Tell him, hey, just so you know, I've already done the work, the stake's already built. Today's the day that Mordecai's going out. As he walks into the king's presence, the king's like, hey, you remember that guy Mordecai? He saved my life. I just can't get over that. I remembered it again. I mean, today, how about you take him around town and just honor him? Right? Humbling in that moment for Haman. Not super thrilled, not super happy. That night is the second banquet, right? And in the second banquet, this is the moment that Esther plays all of her cards, lays them all down, and goes for broke. She unveils to the king, hey, king, I don't know if you remember, but there's a decree that you signed that in 11 months, the entire group of Israelites is going to be wiped out, of which I am part of that, of which Mordecai is part of that. The king at this point, he's a little bit tipsy too, a little bit drunk as well, and he's not thrilled with that idea. Based on everything that he's seen recently, he's like, Haman's not a good dude. Like, I didn't realize that when we elevated him. He's not a good leader. He's just out here trying to kill a bunch of people that are in our kingdom. So the king decides in this moment that Haman gets impaled on the very stake that was built for Mordecai. That's the end of his part of this story. So then the decree still exists though. And at this time and context, you can't just undo a decree. You got to kind of find a workaround. And so what happens, they decide to give the Jewish people the ability to defend themselves and fight back. Anyone that tried to challenge them in that date, 11 months, that they would be able to fight back. So not only are they saved, but all of the enemies that come after the Jewish people in that moment, all of the Israelites in that moment, get wiped out by the backing of the king. I mean, this is incredible. It's a reversal that you would not have thought of, that you would not have constructed. It's so full of these moments of like, that's kind of random, but how is that? I mean, these coincidences keep happening over and over and over again. What I find fascinating on a different level is Esther and Mordecai are not like the model citizens when it comes to the Jewish principles and laws. Like they're breaking them left and right in this story. Like Esther's not supposed to go to the beauty pageant. Let's be clear there. She's not supposed to marry the king. Like all of these things are against their laws, and yet That's exactly what God uses. So when we look at these stories and we're like, man, I can't do that. They're perfect. They're beyond. They're not. They're not perfect. And yet God still uses them. They were not perfect in practice, but perfect in position. It's God had placed them in that place for that moment, for such a time as this. We don't always know what or when these moments are going to come in life. We don't know what they're going to look like. We don't know who's going to be involved, and we don't know the cost of them either. You know, there might be a day that we're just crop dusting and failing at life, and then all of a sudden, we have an opportunity to give of ourselves in order to do something great. The best possible solution for the scenario at hand that we didn't see coming and we, for some reason, have been invited into. This has happened over and again in my life. First, with my wife. You know, Amy had to, I apologize a little bit because I was younger and I had to get old enough in order for us to work out. So God took her on a little bit of a long tour around in order for me to grow up. It was a number of different coincidences. The fact that we chose the same church to be a part of, the same college to go to eventually. The fact that we got involved with the same things. We had the same friend groups. Any one of those things that were off, we probably wouldn't have ever gotten married. But it was exactly God's plan along the way. After we were engaged, we got offered to come up here and help out with youth group. And to be honest with you, I had another offer with a paid position somewhere else. And this one was unpaid. So I did the wise choice and chose this one. But again, when I prayed, it was like, I don't know why, but it feels like this is what God's leading me to. I thought it was going to be a stop along the way. And it's been since 2004 that we've been here. When it comes to our family and how we built our family, I had a plan in place that we were going to take a little bit of time on the front end of our marriage before we were going to start having kids. And then we'd have kids at a certain time, a certain date, and go until we had enough. And then we would be done. But that wasn't God's plan. And we tried to go through our plan, and then it didn't work, and it didn't work, and we tried to adjust, and that didn't work, adjust, and that didn't work. And what was going to be just like a 5-year stint before we started having kids ended up being 12 years before we got Luke. I would not be Luke's father today if my plan had worked out. But God's plan was for me to have Luke as my son, for Amy to have Luke as her son, for him to be part of our family. My plan would have derailed God's plan. The most important parts of my life are not because of my merit that I've earned, that I've done enough, that I was good enough in order for this to happen, but because I've trusted God, because I decided to surrender to Him. For such a time as this, I'm going to do it. He's asked me to make these simplex steps where you just you take one step, you evaluate, how are we doing in the world around us? What's the next best step to take? And He trusts me with that one step at a time. But those big, huge, massive, pivotal moments, those are the ones that He's got in His hands, that I trust Him with. So I do my part, He does His part. The direction of my life and our lives together, gradual, sometimes too gradual, like, whoa, can we pick up the pace a little bit? And then all of a sudden, it's sudden. All of a sudden, it's incredibly fast. Over and over again. But in those moments, we recognize that God has placed you for such a time as this. And I don't know your story. I don't know much about you. But I do believe some things about you. I do believe that you're at church today on purpose. That whether you felt like this was accidental, that someone invited you and accepted the invitation, or you got up this morning like, do I go to church, do I not? And you showed up. Whatever it was this morning, God had a plan for you to be here. There was something that you needed from today that you're going to need for tomorrow or maybe tonight or maybe 5 years from now. There's something about this moment. Or maybe it's a relationship, like you bumped into that person and it seems so random in the moment, but you look back and you're like, this was for such a time as this that God orchestrated, and I decided to go along with it. Or maybe it's the resources that you have. You're like, man, things are going well, but I don't know why. Maybe it's for such a time as this to leverage them for God's purposes, for something greater than just yourself, for something even more. Maybe it's the energy and the time that you've got, a skill that you have. And you recognize, I've got something available for such a time as this. These moments, they may benefit you, but typically, you aren't the only one that's benefited. When you leverage what God has entrusted to you, it is so much bigger than you. So the question, are you willing to let God use you where you are? Are you willing to take the big step? Our battle is one of surrender. And if that's where God leads you, in spite of our fear, in spite of our other thoughts that kind of lend itself into our ear, and they're like, are you really sure that you want to? Is that really the wise choice? Is that really what you should do right now? Should you take the unpaid job versus the paid job? For such a time as this, God has a plan and you can trust it. And when you follow him, when you start to do what he's asked you to do, your relationship with him changes dramatically. You recognize his voice completely differently than before. All of a sudden, when someone else is mean to you, you don't have to respond with meanness or anger. You can choose in those moments to turn the other cheek, to take this shirt off your back, to be generous, to walk the extra mile. Whatever it is that God is asking you to do, that there's a point and a purpose for it, and you can guarantee and rely on that. This morning, as we wrap up this series and in this discussion, I've got some questions because I want to continue this conversation. I think that if this is something where you just hear on a Sunday morning, walk away and nothing happens, then we've failed miserably. This needs to continue on and hopefully affect some other aspects of your life. So some questions for you to think about, maybe talk about with your friends or family. Do you think you might be in a for such a time as this moment? If so, what is it? If not, have you been in one of those moments before? What was it? Have you crossed yourself off the list of possibilities because you aren't perfect? How does the story of Esther express God's heart about you? And then lastly, next time you look in a mirror, this isn't so much a question. Say, armed and ready, sir, I'm packing. No, that's actually just for my enjoyment. It's this. I want you to literally look in the mirror, and when you see yourself, say, I was created for such a time as this. You could have been born at any time in history. You could have been born anywhere in the world, but instead, for some reason, God placed you here and now, and there is a purpose. And it requires us to surrender to God's will, to surrender to our Heavenly Father. Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we love you. We're so grateful for you. But Lord, our understanding and our experience and our insight is limited. We believe that you have created us on purpose and for a purpose, even when we can't see it. But God, I pray that when we approach those critical moments, those crossroads, those intersections, I pray that we would recognize that we would get just a glimpse that for such a time as this, you were placed here. We were placed here by you. And God, even if we don't know what the outcome will be, I pray that we would lean in and trust you and take the bold and courageous step forward, whatever that might look like, whatever the cost would be. Because we know you are greater And the plans that you have for us are greater. So, God, we thank you that you've invited us into this story. That's your story. It's not our story. It is your story. And I pray that we would leverage whatever we have that you've entrusted us to in order for your story to grow and become bigger and bigger. We love you, God. We thank you for everything that you do for us. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. Thank you for being here with us. We'll see you all next week.